one of my favorite bands of all time, probably the most influential band in my life, the Ramones. We've got one of them, CJ Ramone. Now, normally the Friendly Men is Mark and James, but today it's me, CJ, James, and Anthony. So first and foremost, CJ, how are you?
I'm doing all right. How's it going, guys?
First, I would like to say that the Ramones are my favorite band of all time. In my opinion, the Ramones are the best rock and roll band ever. Ever. I mean, that's just, to me, that's like being a Kardashian or, you know, royalty, you know, like, holy fuck, you know.
So wait a minute, you're telling CJ's got a big ass like Kim Kardashian, Anthony, or what?
I didn't say all that.
Come on.
We can speculate. Stand up and show us your ass, CJ.
I'm in my underwear right now. I can't do that.
When I was in the 5th grade, my dad played me Ramones Mania, and it changed my life. He was trying to get me into Rush 2112.
Right.
And I like it. I like 2112 a little bit. I kind of got into it. But
Sure.
I don't want to hear a 16-minute song.
Yeah, Temples doesn't go down quite as easily as Blitzkrieg Bop does. So
Exactly.
I get where you're coming from, brother. I don't know how much you guys know about the history, so I'm going to explain it to you. I'll explain it to you.
Please.
As if you don't know, right? So Tommy originally was the manager. He took Joey, Johnny, and Dede to make a band because they were young, good-looking guys, and he was trying to create like a boy band, right? He told them what instruments they would play, right? He couldn't find a drummer that played the style that he heard in his head. So he told the band, hey guys, look, I'm going to play drums until we can find a drummer. So they were like, okay. So he gets behind the kit and they all realize, holy shit, he's got to be the drummer. You guys with me so far?
Yeah, keep going, CJ. I'm hearing you.
All right. So Tommy decides he's going to be the drummer. They start getting out on the road. Tommy can't handle the road. So he goes to the band and says, listen, I'm going to go back to being the manager. I'm going to find a drummer. I'll teach him how to play my style, and then we'll go from there. So Tommy looks around, hears about Mark. There's even photos of Mark sitting behind Tommy at Ramone shows where Tommy's teaching him how to play at shows. Mark comes in, starts playing. Tommy finally, so Tommy's not going on the road with them at all anymore. Johnny kind of takes over the leadership position within the band. And then ultimately takes full control over the band. With Tommy gone, it's basically Johnny and Monty who are running the show.
In 2001, when Ben and I together watched that live, the induction of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We never watched it before. We have never watched it, but we heard you guys were going to be on it, so we watched it specifically. And the first thing I said to my brother was, "Where's CJ? Where is CJ?" And we felt like you got a little bit gypped out of that. Yeah. So because we know you went forward and you're like, fuck it, it's a Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It doesn't mean anything. Well, CJ, we're gonna give you the Friendly Men Hall of Fame right here on the Friendly Men Show. So yeah.
Thank you. That means a lot more to me than the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'll tell you the honest truth. When
does James even have a trophy?
Ben's gonna send him a death warrant record.
But this is truth. So Johnny came to me. I forget where we were at. This is post retirement. So Johnny came to me and he said, "Hey, he called me up. He said, hey CJ, listen, I got good news." I was like, "What's up?" He's like, "We're getting inducted into the Hall of Fame." I was like, John. I go, holy shit, congratulations. That's what, that's got to be a big feather in your cap. He said, well, listen, I got some bad news too. He said, they're not going to induct you. And I said, John, I don't give a shit. I go, the Ramones are getting into the Hall of Fame. Good. I was like, that's fucking great. I was like, I'm not sweating if I get in there. So he was like, really? You don't care? I was like, no, I don't give a shit about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They have fucking Madonna and all kinds of other shit. They should call it the Music Hall of Fame, right? But I told Johnny, I was like, John, really, seriously, I don't care. He goes, well, I was a little upset, because I feel like that you probably should be in there. I was like, John, listen, I'm not concerned with it. You shouldn't be concerned with it. And let's, in all honesty, right? If you're a punk rocker, what does the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame mean?
Jack and shit.
You know what I mean? It don't mean shit. And the thing is like Anthony said it right. The Ramones are a rock and roll band. They're not a punk band. They're a rock and roll band. You know what I mean?
The best rock and roll band.
Yeah, that's right, brother. And so if anybody really deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, it's the Ramones. And I'm glad they made it in because, we all see the Ramones as this like outsider punk rock bands who did it their way and blah, blah. But the Ramones thought that they were going to be to the Bay City Rollers what the Rolling Stones were to the Beatles. Take a second and think about that. To the Bay City Rollers, what the Rolling Stones were to the Beatles. That's where the Ramones started out. They thought that they were going to be a Teen Beat magazine band. Like they thought they were going to be like a pop band, like a legitimate pop band. That's how fucking crazy they were. They thought that they were going to be like the Bay City Rollers. They wanted commercial success. They wanted to be the big commercial success. And that's why I was really happy that they got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because it was a nod from the industry like, hey, yeah, you guys really did something nobody else did. And that's why I was really happy for them to get in. But otherwise, I don't care what a bunch of fat, bald dudes from record companies my contribution to the Ramones. You know who told me what my contribution to the Ramones was? Johnny, Joey, Arturo Vega, Danny Fields, Monty.
Yeah.
Those people that told me what my contribution was. I don't need a bunch of industry dudes, who are stroking their own dicks by having a Hall of Fame, because that's really what it is. They're patting each other on the back. I don't need those guys telling me that I did a good job in the Ramones. The Ramones fucking told me I did a good job in the Ramones. And that's why, seriously, I'm not bitter. It doesn't bother me. But it's a great topic to come up because there's so many more people who feel that way about the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the way that I feel, that it's a joke.
It seems like, I hate to say it, but emotionally, the guys were not good friends, or at least Johnny and Joey.
You think?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
do you, that it seems like such a tragedy in the end. How do you deal with that you were there, you were friends with both of them. How do you deal with the fact that they didn't talk to each other on their deathbeds? It just seems so tragic.
Like I realized it early on when I first got there, like this was like when I first got into the band, I thought I was joining a gang. Like literally, yeah. I was like, oh yeah, you know what I mean? Like I thought I was joining a gang. And I got there and I quickly figured out this is just a business. This is just a tightly run business. So once I learned about the story about, John and Linda and Joey, the triangle there, I just immediately realized like it's going to be like a tightrope thing. But the thing that I always told everybody was, it's kind of like living in a house where your parents hate each other.
Yeah,
that's what it's like. You know what I mean? And it wasn't always miserable. Like, it wasn't always like, totally dead silent. It was for a lot of the time, but like we had plenty of laughs together. You know what I mean? I mean, literally, we laughed so much in the van. It was unbelievable. And, you know, I really had a lot of laughs with Johnny, especially. But, you know, it really wasn't as bad as everybody makes it out to be. I mean, not that Johnny and Joey, when Joey was on his deathbed, somebody said to Johnny, like, hey, you know, don't you think you should just pick up the phone and call Joey? And he was like, you know, to me, that would be like insulting him. Me and Joey don't like each other. We never did. Even before the Linda thing, we never liked each other. So what, I'm going to call him up now and pretend that I like him because he's dying? You know, like to Johnny, that would be insulting him, you know? And while that seems like a really harsh way to be, that's literally the way Johnny was. Johnny wouldn't have expected Joey to come and knock on his door and be like, hey, sorry for everything, you know, while he was dying. You know what I mean? Johnny was that's just how he was. He was that kind of person. Like, no bullshit. If I don't like you, I don't like you. I can't pretend I do, and I'm not going to try.
That is very New York. That is very New York. And by the way, I hope I didn't scratch any emotional scars. I was always curious about that.
Because this is all like important music history stuff.
Yes, it is.
I know there's some people in the organization that really kind of cringe at some of the stories that I've told, but it's all important. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And you want to talk about the ultimate outsider? I was the ultimate outsider in the Ramones organization. I witnessed everything as a spectator. You know what I mean? My views and opinions are so objective because I love those guys. Yeah. I love them. You know what I mean? But I understand that a lot of it is really important to music history. You know what I mean? And
it's just very important.
Yeah, it really is. Understanding the fuel, you know, what fueled the band. How the fuck did a band that played like that last 22 years? How did a bunch of guys that hated the fuck out of each other stay together for 22 years? You know why? Because they knew the Ramones were important. They knew how important the Ramones were, and they stayed together. You know what I mean?
And you said it. You said, how does a band last 22 years? I'd like to add to a little of that. How does a band last 22 years when they're not even the most proficient musicians on their equipment?
Yep, because they were good at what they did and they stuck to it. You know what I mean? Whereas, you know, like all these other bands that had long careers, and there's plenty of bands that have had long careers like the Ramones, like the Rolling Stones, who kind of have, you know, went with the disco craze and did a little bit of the funk thing. And, you know, all these other bands that reinvent themselves every time a new type of music comes along. You know what I mean? The Ramones kind of did not do that. The Ramones just kind of like, they started out doing pop, but once they hit that heavy vein, that was it. They just went with that and they rode that out till the end.
I kind of want to circle back to Johnny because I think anybody who has any understanding realizes how impactful he was to everybody, how he kept everybody in line, how he kind of kept a drunk and a drug addict in business.
I've had this conversation with people. Like, there's a lot of people who like talk mad shit about Johnny and like really talk him down, right? And Johnny's a complicated dude, without a doubt. Complicated guy. I mean, not fucking overly friendly. You know, the thing I always try to impress upon people is, you take the Ramones and put a different guy on guitar, say Johnny Thunders. The Ramones never even make it past their first record. Maybe not even, or not even their second record.
No.
So if he's not the way he is, the Ramones just fall apart. That's it. It's done. Was he a hard ass? Was he a prick? Did he treat people bad? Yeah, absolutely. But it took somebody like him to manage a situation that was near unmanageable. You know what I mean? Like really, a really difficult situation. And you have to remember, it ain't like, you know, he's the, you know, the shop steward on a job with a bunch of electrical workers and they're drunk every day. You know what I mean? It ain't like that. They ain't all shut up at one place and he has to walk over and kick somebody in the ass or knock a beer out of his hand or nothing like that. You know what I mean? They're on the road. They're living on the road. They're traveling in countries where if you get arrested, you're in a different country. It's like a whole big thing. So he's really he's got a lot of balls in the air. That's basically what it comes down to. So, like, literally, what can you say? Yeah. The guy probably influenced more guitar players than just about any other guitar player. You know what I mean? And not because his guitar playing was great, but because he showed kids who didn't have a whole lot of technical skill how to express themselves. You don't have to be a virtuoso to express yourself musically. That's the beauty of the Ramones. You didn't have to be Jimmy Page or a crazy, well-studied, musician. You could just be an average guy and have something to say and pick up an instrument and be able to say it. You could go on stage and what you wore on the street, your jeans and your leather jackets, you know what I mean? That was such a huge message because that's what most of the kids were. You know what I mean? Most of the kids were not playing, high-end instruments and taking lessons from people who could teach them all these crazy, all this crazy stuff. They were mostly street kids, you know what I mean, that were fans of, bands like Led Zeppelin or even Black Sabbath. Black Sabbath was one of my favorite bands growing up, but even their stuff was challenging, you know what I mean? Towards the end there, when the last couple of years that Dede was at, the band was really just coming apart. They were like the last time I saw them at L'Amour's in Brooklyn, and like Dede was just strumming all the strings open. They had them shut off at the board, like they were like not moving around on stage. And I turned to my buddy and I was like, man, this is like standing in a hospital watching your best friend die. It probably wasn't too long after that. I was riding with a friend of mine in his truck, and there was a station on Long Island, WDRE. It was like the alternate music station, and we're listening to that, and an announcement comes over the radio, and they're like, Dede Ramone just announced that he's leaving the Ramones. And I turned to my buddy and I said, I'll never go to another Ramones show. That's it. It ain't the Ramones without Dede. Every motherfucking show they ever played for the rest of their careers after that. But it was, but towards the end there, like, Dede was really part of the reason why Dede left was he called a meeting of the band and said, from now on, I write all the songs on every record or I quit.
No way.
And they were and Johnny and Joey were like, Dede, that's not going to happen. And he was like, well, then I quit. Wow. So, it was rough at the end. They were just barely hanging on. So, and I'm not saying it's because of me. I think anybody who would have come in, it would have been like a new beginning and blah, blah, and this and that. But like they really needed a change at that point. But you would be surprised how many people told Johnny after Dede quit, told Johnny, just break the band up. It ain't going to be the Ramones without Dede.
And you came in and you kicked ass.
But Johnny told me, he was like, I told everybody, no, it's okay. We'll find somebody, a young Dede kind of guy, and everything will be fine. And Johnny was so smart, man. I tell you, you meet a lot of people in your life that you respect because of their knowledge or their wisdom and blah, blah. But Johnny really, really understood the way things worked in music. He was so smart. He was so sharp. And I really consider myself like beyond lucky. Like I really consider myself blessed to have been able to learn from him and just like he was so much like a father figure, you know what I mean? Like Joey was my friend. Me and Joey went out to shows together. I'd stay over at his apartment. We'd, hang out and talk for hours and turn each other on to music. And like Joey was like the guy that I was more like friends with. But Johnny was definitely more like a mentor. He was more like a dude that would be like, like fucking toughen up. You know what I mean? He'd be like, what are you complaining about? You know, keep your mouth shut, do your job. Like, there was no mixing words with Johnny. And I really appreciated that, coming from where I came from. Like, I appreciated him being direct and honest, but so many people around him were just like, what a prick, you know, he's a nasty guy and blah, 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 this and that. They just, you know, so some people just can't handle, you know, being told what's what, you know. But but by the time I got there, like, they were ready for a change. And I got to say, and I'm not saying that, you know, it's all because of me, but I was in the band for their most successful years. They did more shows in the 7 years that I was there than they did in the 15 years before. And they made more money than they did in the 15 years before. Playing my first show, September 30th, 1989 in Leicester, England. You know what I mean? Like, I did not come to the music business in the way that most people have. And especially coming right out of the Marine Corps into the Ramones. Like, I got to the Ramones, I had never played with a pick before. I had never played with a pick, you know what I mean? So yeah. I came to the Ramones and I was like, you know, what do you need me to do? I'll get it done, right? Coming out of the Marine Corps, that was my attitude. I figured out that if I lowered my bass all the way down and my arm straightened out and my elbow was straight and I was just using my wrist and I could play through the whole set that way. Like, this was all stuff that I figured out in 5 weeks' time, literally in 5 weeks' time. I learn how to do that in 5 weeks' time. And, you know, all this other stuff like walking back and forward during the set, you know, when the choruses come up, that was all in my head because seeing the Ramones, I understood that, you know what I mean? It was like, I didn't have to be taught that kind of stuff. That kind of stuff I knew.
And my favorite story from Monty is when you guys would get on the stage and all the bands would watch you. Like, it's unheard of for that. Like, you had Metallica, you had Soundgarden. What was that like for you performing in front of these iconic musicians who are larger than life? And here's this young CJ Ramone with long hair and a leather jacket playing bass, the 53rd, third, standing on the street. And there's fucking Kirk Hammett next to you. Like, what was going through your head during those moments, man? I love that. I love those stories.
I didn't give a shit. To tell you the truth, and that's not to talk anybody from any other bands down, but to me, being in the Ramones, nothing would top that. There was nobody, you know, there's no, and brother, I met people like from on the front end. Like, I met the dudes from the Sex Pistols and the Clash and the Damned, and like, you know, I met, you know, Robbie Krieger. Like, I met people from the front end of it, you know what I mean? That were, you know, like the originators and stuff. All those bands that you're talking about and all those bands on that tour, Rancid, Metallica, Soundgarden, I looked at those guys as my peers. Those guys were my peers, you know what I mean? And I got to tell you, I'm a huge Metallica fan on top of it, you know? But realistically, like, it didn't make me nervous, those guys standing there, because I knew how they felt. They were just enjoying the Ramones show. That's how I used to be. That's what I used to do. You know what I mean? So I didn't feel intimidated that they were there. I was like, yeah, you know, I really, really dug it. The last record that Tommy works on is Road to Ruin. The first record the Ramones put out that is not great, side for side, 100% killer and no filler.
Potatoes are great.